Call to order our City Council work session for November 17th, 2020. Welcome, everyone. We have lots of folks with us for this hour and a half, so I would encourage folks to use the raise your hand feature. And as I'm trying to see the list, there we go. Perfect. So, take it away, Joe and staff. Erica, looks like you're...
So, I think I am going to start it off. As I mentioned in the email where I sent out the PowerPoint presentation, we've got 3 topics tonight, and they're all related. So we're sort of doing one ginormous PowerPoint presentation. Erica, next slide, please.
Julia?
Yes.
Before you get started, I apologize. Obviously, we have our Planning Commission and the Council on the call tonight, but I also wanted to just recognize that we've got our school board chair, Pat Allen, and our vice chair, Sue Hecker, is joining us for this work session as well, because schools are an important partner when we're talking about land use planning. So I just want to make sure out in TV land that people understood we got those folks with us today. Thanks for joining our call, by the way.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
So tonight we're going to be talking about the first part is going to be talking about the housing element of the comprehensive plan. We're going to review the background and goals, and then discuss a little bit about the housing needs analysis that you're going to have at your hearing and your business meeting tonight, and discuss what it is and what it isn't very briefly. I'm going to talk through the different types of boundary expansions just so you have that context. And then we're going to give you an update on the Sherwood West relook, the schedule, and how it relates to a potential urban growth boundary expansion. And then last but not least, in the hour-and-a-half work session we're going to be talking about the Sherwood North concept plan, give you a little bit of background. The property owner development team is going to be reviewing their draft planning work and then getting feedback from council. So that's what we have on tap tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to Erica and our consultant Anais with 3J to dive into the first topic that we're talking to you guys about tonight.
Anais, are you present? I can't see everyone. This is Erica.
I am present. Hi.
Hi. I'm just going to let you kick it off here.
That sounds great. Hopefully everyone can hear me all right. Erica, you were a little low there in volume, but thanks for having us. I'm really excited to present some information about what we've been doing for the housing block of our comp plan, block 5 of 6. Or excuse me, 4 of 6. Erica, can you move through the slides, please? We're going to flip through these first couple of slides pretty quickly. A lot of this information you've already seen. But just a quick reminder, giving you an update on our work plan. We do aim to have this comp plan completed by early next spring. And so this should be to you by adoption or for adoption by April or May of next year. Next slide. Also, just as a quick reminder about the framework for this plan, we started with a broad community-wide visioning process in 2018, uncovered these 6 themes that are important for the community and the future of Sherwood. And our comp plan is designed around these key themes, and the policy direction comes from the vision and goals during that process. And as you also know, we have a pretty iterative process here for each of our blocks. We always build a baseline understanding of the key theme. We develop and conduct an engagement component. We meet with our TAC and our CAC and our planning commission many times throughout the block. So we're here tonight to present the work that we've done for the housing block. And just also a reminder that this is not the first or last, or sorry, this is not the last time you will be seeing this information around or for this block. And we like to kind of throw this little chart in front of everyone. It's a good matrix that just kind of shows how we are hitting each of these statewide planning goals. So making sure that we can map each block and the topics that they cover to all the statewide planning goals. We know that there's a bit of overlap between the topics and the goals across the blocks. Some of the statewide planning goals we speak to multiple times across each of these 6 blocks. And then the next slide is just a brief little schedule that likely is too small to read and not very important. So I'll just jump in directly into kind of a refresh on what our actual vision statement was and the goals we developed with the community in 2018 around housing. So the vision statement was about by 2040, Sherwood aims to develop a range of housing choices for a diversity of ages and income levels, providing community members the ability to live in Sherwood throughout all stages of life. And through that vision statement, there were also 3 key goals that were identified. The first is about housing choice. The second is about really preserving and enhancing what we have here in Sherwood and love. And then the third is about looking to the future. So what Sherwood's new neighborhoods could look like. So that's kind of the outline for what those 3 goals speak to. So this is the framework from which we started for this block. We always start with asking ourselves a series of just kind of key considerations, questions we want to ask ourselves as we start critically thinking about, you know, what Sherwood's current housing policies look like and how they need to change the dial or just be revised for what the community will be like in 2040. So these were kind of the key questions we developed to at least help guide our thinking process and guide the discussions that were occurring with our technical advisory committee, our CAC, our planning commission, our PAT, through all of our stakeholder interviews, which I'll get to in a moment. We asked these questions in a variety of different ways, just based on audience, but kind of kept to the same philosophy throughout. So, you know, asking ourselves, you know, where should Sherwood consider providing a wider range of housing types? You know, how much of Sherwood's needed housing should be where, and what are the principles that we think really speak to what keeps, you know, Sherwood, as we like to say. So those were kind of the considerations we were using to guide our discussions. So those discussions took place in a variety of different ways. Our housing block kicked off, if you recall, in the spring, so COVID was very fresh on all of our minds. We did a number of different things for our outreach and our engagement work around this block. So the first thing we did is we developed, so we took kind of a 3-pronged approach here. So we wanted to do in-depth stakeholder interviews. This has always actually been kind of where we felt we've got the highest quality feedback across almost all of our comp plan blocks. So stakeholder interviews were really important to do. We also wanted to do kind of a broader preferences survey with the community. And then at the same time, we wanted to explore just the opportunity to dig a little bit deeper and hear stories about what people's experience is with housing in Sherwood and what that means. So those were kind of our 3 major outreach steps. The packet that you got has quite a bit of information and summaries of all of what we heard throughout each of these outreach and engagement activities. But essentially, we had a series of stakeholder interviews. This was great. This was actually co-led by our community advisory committee meetings and project staff. We spoke to all sorts of folks, all of you included, and we really tried to reach out to a broad spectrum of people that had expertise and experience with housing in some form or fashion in and around Sherwood. In addition, we also developed a broad kind of housing needs and preferences online survey. We got a lot of survey responses here. This was great. We got over 1,000 survey responses. We know that housing is a really important topic to community members in Sherwood. We asked kind of two things, what is your current housing experience and what do you suspect your future housing needs might be, either for yourself or your family or your neighbors. So we got some interesting feedback there. As expected, most folks live in single family homes and single family neighborhoods, and there's definitely a desire to see more of that. We also kind of started uncovering a little bit of the distinction between wanting, certain or desires for certain types of other housing versus other types. So a little bit more interest in things like cottage housing versus apartments and things like that. So that was kind of a great kind of exploratory effort. And then finally, we did what we're calling a housing snapshot. So knowing that we had a lot of data about housing in Sherwood through your housing needs analysis, we really wanted to kind of collect stories of people that have, different experiences with regards to access to housing. I would say that just a brief little personal reflection here. I think we struggled a bit to reach a broader cross section of folks, since I think we were hoping to understand the experiences with regards to individual resources. So there was a little bit of trouble in finding kind of a broader spectrum or range of experiences, but I think more than anything it was a really valuable exercise, and we really approached this primarily as an opportunity to develop more educational materials and also just have those conversations with community members. So that was valuable in and of itself.
To interrupt, are you did not get very many responses, or are you saying because you didn't get responses that you liked?
We didn't get very many responses.
Well, and we were hoping to get a variety of responses from primarily different income levels, and the responses that we got were primarily from higher income. So we wanted to kind of find out what it was like for not lower income, but moderate income folks. And we really got responses from pretty much everybody in the higher wage range.
And this was done via or online, correct?
Yeah, this was done. So we made a series of email introductions first and foremost. We kind of relied on our community advisory committee to kind of help push out the word that we were looking for kind of opportunities to interview folks. So yeah, we had email introductions, and then they were either phone or video interviews.
And just to be clear, this wasn't a survey. It was really, we wanted stories. We wanted to kind of highlight the different things within Sherwood, but we were only able to highlight, we still had several different snapshots that represented different types of family groupings and things like that, but we didn't get the full picture, but it is what it is.
So then on the survey, how many responses did you get to the survey?
Over 1,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So that was to the initial survey. I think the follow-up on particularly on these policies and objectives had about 280?
Correct, yeah. And that's always, as we know, a much harder kind of avenue to really gauge or to incite involvement. It's, those surveys are really primarily just pushing out information and providing the opportunity for folks that are particular policy wonks that want to read that language, give us feedback. That's, obviously the purpose of that activity. Okay, so I'll move into our, how that got put into our approach for these policies and objectives for housing. So just a reminder, there are many sources of inputs. Thank you, Erica. Many sources of inputs for updating the housing chapter of the comp plan. Obviously we have a housing needs analysis, and we have some implementation, some policy language that comes from that work. We also have your current comprehensive plan. So there's obviously many policies and objectives in the current comp plan with regards to housing. We have all of these outreach and engagement activities, and then we are also guided by our comp plan vision. So there's, many different kind of things that go into this. So I'm going to walk through there's 4 key policies here, and each policy kind of gets at something a little different, and I'll kind of work to tie it together at the end, and just kind of show you, what they cover and why. So policy 1 is about providing adequate land supply. This is actually there's very few revisions between the language that you see here and actually what currently exists in the comprehensive plan. This is fairly standard policy and objective language. So really just emphasizing the importance of providing adequate land supply, and then also just, ensuring that you have regular monitoring and adjustments of available land through the buildable lands inventory, and that you work with Metro to bring in urban reserve areas into the UGB as needed, etc.
And all these objectives were polled, right, in that second poll?
So we actually spoke to our PAT, and our PAT actually suggested that we don't poll on this first policy, primarily because it is driven mostly by regulation, and there's not much kind of creative license associated here. But they did, so they had us poll on the last 3 policies that we'll be going through that are a little bit, that are less related to like statewide and metro regulation.
So okay. Acronyms are difficult for people that deal with this all the time, much less people watching. So please explain PAT.
Of course, thank you. This is our project advisory team. So our project advisory team is made up of a couple of council members as well as a couple of planning commission members, and they are there to help guide our outreach and engagement activities. So we check in with them a couple of times throughout each block, and kind of brainstorm some ideas for how we want to reach our community. And then this was also a topic of conversation with them, was how we might want to revise or review kind of the online survey we put out at the end of each block that deals primarily with the draft language, which is always a little bit hard to get adequate feedback from the community about.
So just for what it's worth, it was a 10-second answer, I thought, but there's no doubt what it is now. So thank you.
One quick question. Objective 1.4, the 6 dwelling units per net acre. So that doesn't include industrial land and all that kind of fun stuff, or is that overall acreage?
That does not include industrial lands.
Okay.
And is that more of a metro and state guideline, or is that something that we decide here at the city level?
So that's a state guideline. This is Erica, straight out of Goal 10, and it's implementing or the Oregon Revised Statute, and it's called the Metropolitan Housing Rule, and it designates a certain number of densities for cities throughout the state.
All right, thank you.
One more question on that. There's a lot of rulemaking going on with HB 2001 and the primary and optional planning rules that they're coming up with, and I'm getting to density here. Will that HB 2001 trump that, or does this net dwelling units per acre override? Which one's going to take precedence? Because my understanding is in that rulemaking that they're pushing much higher density levels.
I don't think we know yet from the state which one is going to trump what rule at this time. I think that's still playing out. I think we're just going to have to wait and see.
Okay, thank you.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Erica, but I think actually Sherwood maintains a much higher minimum overall density generally.
So we do. I believe on average it's about like 8.2. I believe it's in the H&A.
Correct,
I have
yeah.
it somewhere written in my notes.
Yeah,
Great.
we're one of the most dense cities in Oregon. Believe it or not.
So are you guys ready to move on to policy 2?
Sure.
Next.
Great. So policy 2 is really focused on coordination around infrastructure provisioning. So here, this is about just continuing to coordinate capital improvement planning to ensure infrastructure availability on residential land. Continue to coordinate with your regional partners to develop infrastructure across the city that supports housing growth. And then also coordinating population, residential growth, and infrastructure planning with a school district specifically to ensure that land is available for new schools as needed and that utilities can be efficiently provided to new school sites. As we know, schools and residential growth are deeply connected. The third policy. This is about focused on preserving and enhancing Sherwood's existing neighborhoods. So something that resonates with the goals and vision of the visioning process, but then also resonates with what we heard through our engagement activities. So this is about encouraging that, actually objective 3.1, my apologies, the grammar is off here. It should not say encourage existing neighborhoods to benefit. Well, actually, I think the grammar is a little off here, so we'll have to fix that. But the point here is that we want to make sure existing neighborhoods benefit from all the amenities and things that happen that come with additional residential growth. We want to make sure that we direct infill development into areas where there are already many services and amenities. We want to also encourage housing of a quality and a design that's compatible with the existing neighborhood. And while we do that, we also want to make sure that existing neighborhoods don't feel the negative impacts of traffic, noise, lack of parking, lack of privacy, etc., through compatible site and building designs and techniques, etc. So just kind of managing that.
So this is Doug.
Doug has his hand up. Yeah.
Julia, did you want to add something before I spoke?
No, I was just going to say that Councillor Scott had his hand up.
All right, thank you. So I think it should be noted that objective 3.2 was only supported by about 40% of the respondents to the poll about this, although there did seem to be a high degree of uncertainty or maybe lack of understanding of the context or the definitions. It was 40% in support, 24% against, and about 36% didn't really know, so, or were neutral. I think that's worth calling out.
Thanks, Doug.
And by the way, I'm going to have these on each of the next 2 slides as well. So when we get to the end of
Sure.
I'll jump in.
Yeah. That sounds good. Yeah, and we're happy to take a look at that again. I think the hope or the thought process there was that we, if if infill development happens, it should happen in areas where there already is significant development and access to transportation and shopping and things like that, of which Old Town is an example, but not the only. So policy 4 This is about developing complete neighborhoods. So this is kind of speaks to that. What do future neighborhoods in Sherwood look like, and how are they planned? So this emphasizes the importance of utilizing concept planning, master planning, all these various techniques to foster creative and flexible and innovative division of land, of siting of buildings, et cetera, as the development of new residential areas occurs. We also spoke to, or Objective 4.2 speaks to encouraging the design of neighborhoods in a manner that incorporates the following principles. So cultivating a mix of housing types, creating walkable neighborhoods, providing safe and effortless connectivity to key neighborhood amenities, primarily schools, enhancing existing natural assets and integrating green spaces. We really heard over and over just the importance of trail connections and green spaces, and how that's really helped form a sense of community and just kind of how, the quality of Sherwood's existing neighborhoods. So trying to replicate that as much as possible in future development. And then finally, enhancing Sherwood's small town character and historic core through design and architectural features that are, human scale and accessible and inviting to all. Objective 4.3 speaks to utilizing a density transfer, just as an example of preserving open space and then developing recreational areas within kind of a single master planned area. And then, of course, promoting housing and site design that supports kind of continued vitality of areas that are of special interest or historic or cultural value. That's a couple of these, a couple of pieces of the language here are actually already in your existing comp plan, so we kept some of it. Yes, I see hands raised, but I can't view everyone very well, so please.
So I'll just kind of jump in a little bit here. I think that I'm taking this one as a personal reflection as part of the PAT. There's a lot of technical terminology on these 4 points, and I think that led to a lot of maybe confusion or misunderstanding by the people who wouldn't understand necessarily what concept planning or density transfer mean. So there was a high amount of don't knows on all 4 of these, except for number 2, particularly number 3, objective 3.3, which I will note only had 44% support, but again only 19% disliked it, but 37% didn't know what it meant. So all right, that's my didn't know or were neutral, I guess I would say. So I think this is more of a probably a failure in the terminology that we used in the poll, but it is worth calling out.
Yeah, thanks for that reflection, Doug, and completely agree. This, as I said, language is hard to communicate to the public primarily because a comprehensive plan is a land use document. Sometimes, more so a land use document than maybe a coffee table book. So it will always probably have aspects that are a little bit more difficult to the layperson, or ideas that are a bit more difficult.
Okay, Tim?
Yeah, just real quickly, the concept of density transfer, is that something that you apply to the old, like for instance, the overall Sherwood West concept plan, where we're going to have parks here and stream corridors, et cetera. But over here, to make up for that, we're going to put in, I'm just exaggerating here, apartment buildings to make up for that density. Or is that something that really happens at the individual development level?
It's a common tool for PUDs.
Right.
So if you have a project that has a stream corridor in it, or a project that has some wetlands, or just incredibly undevelopable, there's a process to get more a percentage higher density for protecting and providing an amenity as well. But I'm not aware of it being used in concept planning or master planning.
Okay, that's where I was going. Thanks.
And then I'll call Justin in a second, but I first have a concern with the language used in objective 4.1. It sort of means we have to utilize those techniques. I think it should just be available. And I don't know. I'm not a fan of master planning, as master planning is evolving, and have zero plans to support a master plan in residential, anyways, in the future. Justin?
Yeah, just thinking off of the points that Doug is bringing up with the polling data, since we have the polling data related to these different objectives, it would probably be really helpful to have that polling data underneath each objective, just to kind of show how in line these things are with the polling data that we received.
We certainly can do that, Justin.
Are you suggesting that be in the comp plan or just for your reference?
Or, I mean, probably just for reference, or I don't know if it necessarily needs to be in the comp plan potentially, but just something that is there to reinforce the, either the need or the legitimacy for the different objectives.
Also, just a quick reminder, Justin, that none of these are statistically significant surveys. So they, I mean, they're certainly show trends in thought, but we also, they don't represent the entire Sherwood community as well.
I mean, it doesn't, but we went through the trouble of having the polling data. If we're not going to work with the polling data or listen to it, it seems bizarre why we even went through the trouble. So,
this is Erica. Sorry, I can't see everyone. Justin, I think as we move forward, I think that's a tool that we can utilize when we come back to all of these policies and objectives to review. We can look at that polling data and see how we can utilize it underneath every policy and objective. I think that might be useful.
Just for a quick point of clarification, this is survey data, not polling data.
Yes, survey data.
A little bit wonkish there, but I think it's important to distinguish that. But I do think this is the best available information we have on how our community feels about these objectives. So I think it does need to carry some weight, even if it's not, pulled with a sampling error.
I think it's also worthy to note, that there are pretty good numbers in terms of responses received. So, I agree with you. I don't think it's insignificant. So.
And Erica, while we're reviewing this together in a joint meeting, this segment goes back to the Planning Commission for further conversation and recommendation.
That is
right?
Correct. Correct.
Thank you. Tim's got his hand up again.
I do. Thank you. I guess it would be helpful then. A couple of questions. How were the objectives identified coming out of the initial poll that you did with the 1,000 or more respondents? And as a result of the secondary polling on these objectives, did we pull any objectives, or did it change what we put into this document?
Yeah, so as I said, there were multiple things that kind of went into developing the language for these objectives. I would say the majority of the basis for each of these objectives primarily came from your current comprehensive plan, as well as some of the ideas that came through with regards to like design principles for neighborhoods. Those were gleaned, for example, through the urban the landform analysis and mapping work that Sarah Architects had done, as well as our stakeholder interview notes, and just those kinds of discussions about like what are the elements that make Sherwood's neighborhood special. But most of that language does come from the existing comprehensive plan, and then identifying, okay, what are the concepts that are missing from the 1990 plan, and what are we hearing from our discussions with our community advisory committee, or TAC, et cetera. And then, excuse me, your last question was, to what extent did the polling or the survey at the end that gauged folks' support for these objectives and policies? We actually have a slide at the end that's kind of just is a refresher on where support lay. And generally speaking, we actually had strong support, or, you know, stronger support for preserving and enhancing neighborhoods. So policy 3, and then policy 4, developing complete neighborhoods. And then we didn't really find a lot of consensus among respondents around the next policy 5, attainable housing. So we didn't make any specific changes to the language based on this survey, but we did get an understanding of just general support for which we felt comfortable with.
I was going to reserve my comments until you ran through this slide first.
Great. So then the last policy, policy 5, encourage a variety of housing options and price points. So this speaks to obviously providing opportunities for a greater variety of housing types that are attainable to both current but also future households in Sherwood. So objective 5.1 speaks to identifying opportunities to increase residential development and balancing or keeping a balance of the housing supply, supporting a variety of housing types. So kind of listing out a variety of different housing types, supporting housing that's affordable to Sherwood's residents and workers at businesses in Sherwood, as well as including housing options for first-time home buyers, new families, elderly, and persons with disabilities. Support homeownership opportunities through a variety of different means and avenues. And then finally, 5.5, collaborating with nonprofit organizations to provide opportunities for the development of lower income housing, or, you know, such as rent subsidized housing. So partnering with developers that do that.
Okay. So first I'll note that not a single objective on this slide was supported by more than 50% of the 286 respondents to this language. 2.3, or sorry, 5.3 seemed to be the most supported. It had 48% support. It did also have a high degree of don't know or neutral of 31%. Objective 2.1 was fairly mixed, 36% like, 42% dislike. Objective 2.2 was also fairly balanced, 40% like, 36% don't. The last two are, I think, where our biggest problems lie. 5.4, which I don't know where this genesis from. It didn't seem to come out of the initial 1,100 person outreach we did. I don't know what caused it to become an objective in the first place, but 55% dislike and only 24% like, which is like 2.5 to 1 ratio. And then 5.5 was not on the survey, so it's a fairly new addition. And again, I question, how did that get there? Where did it come from?
Not to mention, it's a method, not a goal.
So, Doug, from our planning commission work sessions, and staff, please chime in if I'm remembering this differently. But as far as 5.5, I remember that coming into play because nonprofit organizations were seen as stakeholders and gave us this input to include it. I have issue with that, or kind of how it came about. With the objective itself, if we do decide to keep it, during our planning commission work sessions, I brought up the issue that we really don't need to highlight nonprofit organizations if we want to keep this objective. I feel the objective is just as strong if you remove with nonprofit organizations. Personally, I don't feel that we need to highlight nonprofit organizations, and most because depending on how a nonprofit organization operates, its development in your community, if they run it as rental housing, there's particular issues with that, in that they run rental housing, they receive rent for their operation. However, as a nonprofit organization, they're exempt from property taxes. So being that they're an organization housing people in our community, not paying into the property taxes necessary to provide for them, creates pretty obvious issues. So, if we do want to keep 5.5 from our planning commissions, I believe we had already removed nonprofit organizations. If city council, agrees with that, if we want to keep it at all, I think that's where it should go.
Jean, have your hand up.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide input. I would like to hear, as we go forward in the process, council concerns and what your strike-through suggestions would be. When we look at this from the Planning Commission perspective, we were taking what the Citizen Advisory Committee and the consultants had recommended, and not really, what do we strike through? What does the council want to see? Where are we going with it? So this work session to me was really important to hear what you wanted to strike through, because I agree with Councillor Scott that Objective 5.4 didn't have a lot of support, and going forward there were other comments made that that's not what most of the citizens of Sherwood want to see within most of the neighborhoods of the community. So it just seems like we need to have more council directive of what your concerns are and what your strike-through suggestions would be on objectives that are outside of what your goals are with our community. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. Renee?
So I think I come at it from a different point of view, and I would just like us to consider it. If we look at the vision, the 2040 vision statement is talking about a range of housing choices for diversity of ages and income levels. Out of all the objectives so far, these section 5 are the only objectives that really speak to attainable. And if we are supposed to be forward looking, we're supposed to be thinking, or I would suggest that we should think about what the future of Sherwood would be, as far as the new families moving in, the millennials moving and trying to afford housing, and then our seniors as they continue to age on. In my humble opinion, I think we should consider weaving the attainable portion throughout the document just a little bit more.
Thanks, Renee. Other comments on this section? Tim?
Yeah, on section 5.5, and Jean, thanks for that input, and I want to honor your request. I think as I think about that, obviously we're not a housing authority. We're not like Washington County or Beaverton or Metro. We don't control large pools of cash, to help start programs like that, nor do we have the property to donate. So I'm wondering from a practical point of view how we could shape that to where we're working toward the goals that Renee talks about, but I'm just trying to understand from a feasibility point of view what really is within our power to do, other than advocate and bring different groups together and do those types of things.
Anyone want to, staff or consultant, want to comment on that?
I guess I'd just say that sometimes you have things that are in your comprehensive plan that are aspirational and kind of help support your action. So, yeah, I mean, even if it's aspirational, it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be in there if it's something that we want to work towards.
This is Erica again. Looking back at the 1990 comp plan, I think there were some objectives in that plan that were aspirational, that the city, may or may not have took action on. but they're in that plan.
Doug, you have your hand up again, or is that?
Yeah, no, I do. I just wanted to follow up on my thoughts. I know Gene was looking for specific requests, and I certainly agree with Councilor Browse about the aspirational goals. Actually, really, I like the spirit of what 5.5 is going after. I guess I'd say it just needs rewording. I feel like it's maybe too specific, and I think that we can reword that objective to be maybe more generic, but going after the same goals. As far as 5.4 goes, I'm in favor of striking 5.4 completely. I think it still is captured, or the idea, it doesn't prevent us from building those things. Obviously, if you look at some of the other objectives, even on this page, it talks about a mix of housing types, a range of housing prices, a mix of, objective 1. Objective 2 talks about, again, a variety of housing types, even mentions, some of the same types that are in 5.4. So I think 5.4 just seems, unnecessarily prescriptive when it doesn't really, it clearly isn't supported by a large portion of the community that responded, and it can itself be accomplished, through the other objectives that are already on the page.
Doug, I would just say to that, maybe I'm wrong. I think 5.2 and 5.4 do have some similarities, but I think 5.4 has a little bit different goal in mind, where the verb there is to support home ownership rather than building a variety of housing types, unless I'm interpreting those differently, but they are very similar.
Thanks, Sean. And that's an excellent point, Sean, and Doug, your point. I will get to Russell in just a second. On 5.4, I think supporting home ownership opportunities is a good thing, if it's in this objective or another. On this objective, you don't have to define, all of the housing types in 5.2 is opportunities. If the collective wanted more than that on there, certainly home ownership I'm a fan of, and I'd rather have condos than apartments. I don't know truly. Maybe I'm too much of a bubble. I don't know how co-op housing works. I don't know limited equity cooperatives work. I don't know if they need to be in there. So that's my comment on that one. I think 5.5 could use some wordsmithing. Russell?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with what Doug said, and I agree with what you said as well. I think maybe 5.4, if we don't strike it, is too specific. It could be a little more generic, and same thing with 5.5. Maybe, I don't think that we should, I don't think Sherwood is trying to be exclusive, but we're not Milwaukee. We're not, Tigard in the middle-ish of the metro area. We're on the edge, and so our housing types and opportunities are going to have to start somewhere and then maybe at some point morph into more like what's on the list. I know that, as Erica mentioned, and I remember reading these in the comp plan from a million years ago, that some of these are in there. They are aspirational goals. But at the same time, I think maybe a little less specificity would be great. That's my comment.
Thanks, Russell. Gene, your hand's up again, or did I miss it?
Yes. I just wanted to chime in on the specificity on 5.4. That was the concern and one of the questions that was raised previously of multi-dwelling housing. One of the phrases that I had heard recently was scalable housing. So supporting home ownership opportunities that's scalable. So the difference between single family cottage and single family on an acre lot, you still have the home ownership opportunity, but it doesn't have to be multifamily. You can scale the project so home ownership is more attainable based on the size of the house and the size of the lot. So the multi-dwelling is really specific versus scalable opportunities.
Thank you, Gene. And Russell, your hand's up again, or? Okay. Other comments or questions on objective 5?
I just wanted to chime in on 5.4 really quick. I agree with the thoughts on supporting home ownership. Gene, I like your comment about the scalable aspect of that. I think we should be encouraging home ownership across all aspects of housing where we can, just because that is the number one way that the average individual can create wealth as they head into retirement. And I do worry that we have too many people renting in condominiums and triplexes and quads, et cetera. So anything we can do to, as an aspirational goal, support homeownership is a good idea.
Thank you, Tim. Kim, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Tim just kind of beat me to the punch. I kind of was going to agree with Gene's comments about the word scalable. I kind of really like that term as opposed to multi-dwelling. So that was all.
Thank you, Kim. Renee?
Yeah, I was going to agree somewhat with what Gene said as well, and suggest that in some capacity leave in support homeownership opportunities, whether we use scalable or some other language, something in there showing home ownership opportunities, I think is essential. And I would encourage us to leave objective 5.5 in there in some capacity, can wordsmith it, but I think that it's important that we do address the lower income side of things in some shape or form.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you, Renee. Justin?
Yeah, regarding 5.5, are there any further comments as to what is too specific? What should we as Planning Commission, focus on? Or
This is Tim. I would just say, and I'm just one data point, is I think it needs to be a lot more aspirational in general, because we just don't have a lot of levers to pull. We don't know what those levers are going to be in 5, 10, and 15 years. So I think it needs to be more aspirational towards what the end product looks like, as opposed to using specific tools.
Sorry,
Doug?
I just wanted to chime back in, and now that I've heard everyone else respond, and I recant my previous request to remove 5.4, I'm on board with the plan that everyone else has agreed with about changing the wording.
Thank you, Doug. Okay.
All right, thank
Erica?
you so much for that feedback. That was really quite valuable, so much appreciated, and we've taken notes here. This is one of the last slides, but really I just was hoping to kind of tie it together and show a map of how all of these policies work together. So as I had mentioned as we were going through this, policy 1 and 2 are maintained from the current comp plan. Policy 3 is really speaking to community desires around preserving and enhancing existing neighborhoods. Policy 4 is kind of looking to the future and seeing how to replicate those community desires into new neighborhoods, so ensuring that growth happens the Sherwood way. And then finally, policy 5, which we were just speaking to, is a combination of responding to best practices and then also House Bill 2001. Next slide. Yeah, and then this was just a quick little refresh on where we landed with that survey around those goals and policies. So I had mentioned this earlier, but we did see a majority of respondents supporting policy 3 and policy 4. We didn't see as strong of a consensus around policy 5. And then we did note a couple of just the key things that folks mentioned in the online survey, limiting density, etc. All right, so last slide, just next steps, or the hope for this meeting, which I think we met, was to really review the process and the work we completed to date, and then also seek feedback from you all on the draft housing goals and policies. So thank you so much for providing that. It was quite valuable. And then finally, next steps. we are on to our the 5th out of 6 comp plan blocks, which is speaking to infrastructure and transportation. And that is what we are currently working on now. And then the last one will be around parks and trails, and that'll kick off in the new year.
So deep breath, that was a lot of information. So we had some really good conversations there, talked a little bit more than I had anticipated. So I just want to kind of do a time check. We've got several things still to discuss, and we're planning on just plowing through, but we want to make sure that people have an opportunity to still talk. But just kind of
we'll just run along. Unless there's objection from council, we're going to run past our designated time so we can cover everything.
Okay. So the first thing I'm going to talk about briefly, actually, Erica's going to talk about is the housing needs analysis. Then we'll talk about Sherwood West relook and the urban growth boundary expansions. As you know, or hopefully you know, council is holding a public hearing tonight on the housing needs analysis, and we'll get a lot of details in that and in the staff report. But we wanted to, before we dive into Sherwood West, and as we've talked about the housing component of the comprehensive plan, we wanted to highlight that it's different from the housing element that we just talked about. And so I'm going to turn it over to Erica just to briefly kind of talk about why it's different and what that means.
Sure. Thanks, Julia. So I'm going to be really quick here. The housing needs analysis really helps to inform decisions centered around future residential needs about housing in the community, but it doesn't dictate any actions. It's a technical document that really analyzes the historical and recent development trends regionally and locally. We look at the projected number of households within the 20-year planning period, and we forecast that need with a mix of certain needed housing types within the community. This analysis also looks at the residential land capacity in the community for the 20-year planning period. And at the moment, it tells us that there's a deficit of 608 housing units. And all in all, it's just a basis to support residential housing and how Sherwood will grow in the future.
So just to, before we move on, just to kind of highlight, it informs our decisions and our moving forward, but it doesn't dictate the timing of those. I know that there's been some questions about, does that mean we have to take action immediately? And we believe the answer is no. We have to think about it, but a 20-year plan is just that, a 20-year plan.
Right.
Yeah, just to jump onto that, what that means is that we have a 600 unit deficit over a 20-year horizon. We don't have a 600 unit deficit right now.
Correct.
Right. That is correct. Yeah.
And just for people that are listening out in TV land, this analysis, and Julia, correct me if I'm wrong, Erica, you too, this includes all the land that was brought into the UGB in the Brookman area. So we do have quite a lot of land that's yet to be developed, that's already within the city limits or easily annexable to the city. Is that a word? Annexable?
That is correct.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
In planning, anything can be a word.
Okay.
So I'm going to quickly talk about urban growth boundary expansions. There are 3 ways to do an expansion or to ask for an expansion. The first one is, Erica, next slide. The first one is the one that we're probably all the most familiar with. It's the legislative amendment process. And it's called the legislative amendment because it's required by the legislature. Metro is required to review the supply and demand for housing and job land every 6 years. And then they're required to make amendments to achieve that. So that is a requirement of Metro. And sometimes that doesn't even have to be urban growth boundary expansions. It could be policies for more density or things like that. But most recently, it's been urban growth boundary expansions. The other way, back to the legislative. Those are based on region-wide needs. not specific to a jurisdiction. So if the region needs 1,000 acres and one jurisdiction doesn't need that much, they still may have 1,000 acres added to their boundary because it's meeting their regional need. The next time frame for them to begin that process is 2024. Okay, next slide now. The mid-cycle ask is a new process that actually has not been tried yet.
You're not going to be able to zip past that quickly.
Sorry, go ahead. What?
Go forward. So are you saying that in theory, if Metro deemed there was a need for 1,000 acres of residential land at whatever cycle, and cities within the Metro boundary asked to only add 100 acres, Metro could add 1,000 acres and do it to a city not wanting it?
In theory, they could. I think recently and politically that has not been what happens, but in longer history that has occurred. That is how Damascus was formed. You know, frankly, that there was a regional need. They basically expanded the urban growth boundary and met that need over there. And then there was a lot of discussion about sub-regional need, but that's not what the legislature requires.
Yeah, so it was such a successful endeavor. The odds of that truly happening.
Exactly. And that's why I said in theory, yes, but in reality, they don't want to have the urban growth boundary expanded and then not meeting those needs and not seeing development. So they're, I believe, highly unlikely to expand the urban growth boundary in areas where cities don't want it, which is kind of why we have the new ask paradigm, where they want to know that if they're bringing it in, that it's going to be developed.
Yep.
And Julia, that's during the legislative cycle, which we're not in right now. We're in the mid-cycle ask.
Correct. Right. So the mid-cycle is new. It was recently created and has not been utilized yet. But basically what that allows is jurisdictions that have a demonstrated need, that they have a need, can ask somewhere between, in the middle of the legislative ask, for a modest expansion. The Metro language says regardless of how many people ask for land to be added to the UGB during this mid-cycle, they can't modify it by more than 1,000 acres, but they don't have to modify it by anything. But it has to be, the local jurisdictions have to make the request. It has to be identified for their local need. And we believe it has to be connected to the housing needs analysis to demonstrate that need. It can include a small amount of supportive other things, such as commercial and retail land, but our understanding in talking with Metro and reading the language is that it has to be supportive of and not equal to or more than. And then they're doing that. Our understanding is 2021. We haven't gotten a definitive date, but we're thinking it's going to be around June that they contemplate that ask.
Julia, is that in, because I read the text of the ordinance from Metro and it says it can be a mix of residential and commercial, but based on your conversation, I'm reading that is they're trying to accommodate like mixed use type situations where you have retail on the first floor and apartments on the second and third floor.
I think, and they're trying to kind of allow for those, like it also talks about parklands and things like that. So it's more like if we're going to bring a residential area in, there might be an opportunity to provide a small amount of parkland and commercial land that's supportive of that residential component. That's our understanding.
Thank you.
Okay. Major amendment.
Understanding from just staffers or from Metro councilors or the CEO?
Staffers and the code. We have not talked to the CEO or the Metro Council, but that's our understanding. But
okay, I'll read it differently.
Okay,
we'll talk about that.
So the major amendment process is one that is not as common. Actually, it's the process that the school district utilized to expand the urban growth boundary. Basically, it allows for amending the urban growth boundary for public facilities, schools, and other areas, and non-housing needs. The Metro will accept those annually when they're not in the legislative amendment process, and they have a window in which they will accept them. And we just received notice the applications will be accepted between February 1st and March 15th. And that's the process that when we get to the Sherwood North discussion, that's the process that they're talking about.
His hand is up. Is that intentional?
That is absolutely not intentional.
Okay. So we really wanted you guys to have.
Mine is.
Oh,
apologies. So when the applications have to go in that window, when is the decision window?
It's not very long after that. I think it's a couple months. I don't recall off the top of my head, but when we get to Sherwood North, I am sure that the representatives from their group will be able to answer that definitively. But I think it's a pretty quick time frame that they go through that process.
So in theory, if any city were to ask in this mid window, then and the ask was granted or approved, then potentially that area could come within the UGB by summer.
Yes, I believe so.
That's very fast. Okay,
thank you. That's I wasn't paying entirely attention on the schedule for the mid-cycle calendar. What's the mid-cycle calendar?
The mid-cycle calendar is 2021. And we believe that they will be asking around June, or having sort of like June is the deadline for submittals of any asks if jurisdictions have them.
Okay.
We really have two options that we're looking at then: the mid-cycle or the screen that you just moved past, the February to March.
So it's more, we wanted you to understand that there's three methods for expanding the urban growth boundary. The legislative is always there. It's just every 6 years. The mid-cycle is a potential opportunity that is coming up in 2021. If we wanted to make an ask primarily for residential purposes. And then the other amendment is the major amendment process. That's for non-residential purposes. So two different things. And really we wanted to talk about that so you have the context for the next conversations, which is the Sherwood West update and the Sherwood North planning that we're going to talk about.
As an example, the high school property was brought in under the major amendment process.
Right.
That is right. That's correct.
Julie, just a quick question. What has Metro telegraphed what their total, how many acres they're looking at in total?
For what?
For the
mid-cycle. Mid-cycle's 1,000 acres, up to 1,000.
That's the maximum that they can do, that they're permitted to do. Okay, I'm going to let Erica, hopefully, sorry, it's like everything's like quickly, but there's lots of questions. It's very complicated. Give us an update on where we're at with the Sherwood West relook.
Thanks, Julia. So I'm going to talk about the Sherwood West relook really quick. You know, why we're doing this project and kind of the timeline for it as well. So with the development of the high school, the update to the comprehensive plan, new development that's going on in Brookman, and new development in Riverside Terrace in the King City areas, you know, it's really time to do a little relook of the Sherwood West preliminary concept plan. Staff, we applied and received a $130,000 grant from Metro to take this relook. And we currently are expected to have a consultant on board by December, and for this project to kick off in early January 2021. I just want to preface this slide because we don't have a detailed scope of work for this project yet, because we're still in the middle of selecting our consultants and working through Metro's IGA process. But we expect that this process will take anywhere between 12 to 14 months to complete. This
I
also includes,
really, 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 really would hope that's not the case. But that's just me.
so this project will include, public involvement, reviewing of the goals and policies through the lens of our updated goals and policies in our comp plan, and then, analyzing land uses and transportation alternatives as well, and doing some market research for employment and office and commercial uses.
So, as we alluded when we talked about the different ways to expand the urban growth boundary, we know that there is an interest in how the Sherwood West relook aligns with a potential UGB expansion. And we do believe that there is a window for a mid-cycle ask, even though we are also going to be in the process of doing the relook. It is small. We believe that the most we can ask for is tied to the housing needs analysis and the 608 units. So about 70 acres. We might be able to ask for a little bit more for some supportive industrial land. And I know obviously the mayor is kind of questioning whether or not we could do a little bit more, and we can explore that with Metro if that is of interest. It's primarily for residential. What it would require is us identifying fairly early on in the relook process where residential land would stay versus the more employment land. We know that with the relook, we want to have a better balance of the employment land and residential land, and so we'd really need to be able to identify fairly early on in that process where we think residential land will continue to be the primarily residential land. And we think it's possible, but it will require coordination. And it could be a heavy lift if just for Metro, because we are in the relook process, but we could, explain that if we needed to. So I'm going to pause there. That was really what we wanted to talk about and give you that, where we're at, how it ties in or might tie in, and just sort of get thoughts, feedback before we move into the Sherwood North concept plan discussion.
So, like I said, I'm part of me, because I'm not in a big happy mood with Metro. I mean, when have I been? But they're kind of on their heels with the failed transportation measure, and now they're getting some grief over garbage. And part of me would think that they would want to be supportive of economic development and jobs during this time, and we're consuming our vacant industrial land pretty quick. We had a significant pre-app meeting, a couple of them, to consume rather sizable chunks of vacant industrial land. And I think we'll have some serious needs for that before 2024. So part of me wants to press Metro on that with an ask, or at least to go down the road and keep pushing the question, with it being phased, with there being control by council, and when it happens, of some housing and a lot of jobs, or a lot of industrial. We're all different on the importance of jobs versus industrial property, but both would be ideal. But we definitely, part of our economic plan is to diversify our tax base, and so I want to keep pushing that point if possible. One of the mid-cycle asks that is anticipated is Tigard. I'm hearing from Tigard that they need more time, and the app window that Metro is suggesting is too fast for them. So if the only two mid-cycle asks are from potentially Tigard and potentially Sherwood, if they let us be more creative, they might give us a little more time. But there's unknowns that if I mean, I have zero interest in a residential only ask. I mean, I have zero interest in a residential and supportive commercial ask, because that doesn't move the needle on the tax base question. So that's my kind of foray of comments. Others? Tim, on the top of my little list of hands.
Thanks, Keith. Well, first of all, I just wanted to just step back for a moment for people watching out. I'm going to say in desktop or iPad land, because not everybody's watching this on TV. But one of the reasons the original Sherwood West plan was done quite a long time ago. It was done when we were really focused on residential growth. And part of the reason that we went after doing a relook is for a lot of the reasons that Keith just cited, that, the council clearly 2 years ago refocused efforts on economic development and jobs and balancing our tax base between residential, commercial, industrial, light industrial, et cetera. And if you look at Sherwood West, there's prime industrial land out there. There's prime land to build an office campus, or something like that. And as a whole, in the whole metro region, we are quickly running out of those types of parcels. They're becoming in short supply. So there's not only is there an opportunity to do a relook, to look at how we better use those land resources out there, but it's also an opportunity to maybe attract business to Sherwood down the road, because there's just not a lot of options for maybe a larger company that wants to build a big campus, or who knows, dream big. Maybe we can get a fab plant over here. But I think it's important that we do this relook, we do it right, we really understand best uses for that land in terms of the goals and objectives of the city, et cetera. And the other thing I want to add as we think about an ask, we have some unknowns floating out there that we really need to understand. HB 2001 really is changing how cities do planning, master planning, that term that Keith doesn't like, but it's really changing how we do planning. For those that don't know about it, but it effectively allows a developer to choose the type of housing mode that goes onto a property as they're developing. There are some tools we can use, but we really need to understand that those changes impacts on our ability to plan. We need to understand how we can use annexation rules to control and chunk growth as we move into the future and do asks. We need to understand how annexation agreements can help us manage that growth. Those are all important things that we kind of have to get a really clear understanding of how those tools work and how we can use them as a city, so we can really meter, manage, chunk the growth that's coming into the city, whether it's industrial or residential.
I agree with almost everything you just said.
Almost.
Kim.
Yes. So I was just thinking, when I saw that timeline for the Sherwood West relook, and it taken a year, and I realized we don't have a consultant yet, so we don't really have a specific timeline. So that seemed obviously a little bit long to me. But it seems like if we did an ask prior to that being completed, we would be jumping the gun. And then the other concern, obviously, for me is schools. And just reading two of the public comment letters that we received on this issue from two developers, was that they both said that they could see homes within 4 years on whatever properties they're talking about, which is a lot sooner than I think we would anticipate. And so that, 4 years, or which would be about 5 years from now, what that would look like for our schools, would they be ready for potential students from however many homes that would be, 420, 300, I don't really know. So just to take that into consideration as well as we're moving forward.
Thanks, Kim. Renee?
Just have a clarifying question. So if I understand, Julia, what you just said, the potential for 70 acres for the 608 units that we currently, that is in our needs analysis, that is for the mid-cycle ask, correct?
Correct.
And so what would be the amount that we could ask if we were to do the second option, which was
The legislative?
the major amendment?
So you don't need to do that for the major amendment, and it's because it's for non-residential, so you could potentially do more than that for non-residential. But the major amendment is not applicable to residential land.
Okay, and so there's an option where you could do both? You could do both a major amendment and then a mid-cycle ask for the residential portion?
Potentially.
Okay, thank you.
Doug?
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of things we have to get done. We got to finish our comp plan. Then we've got to go into all the rule writing we need to put into place once we adopt the comp plan, right? So we need housing design standards. We need, you know, other code amendments to actually implement what we're putting together in our comp plan. We need to do the Sherwood West relook. Our schools need time to pay down bonds and be able to fund future school capacity. The timeline of the Sherwood West relook is longer than the UGB mid-cycle ask timeline. It just doesn't feel like this fits. It doesn't feel like it fits. You know, with all those things that we have that we need to get over the goal line before we should be going out for this ask. In my opinion, I think 2024 makes a ton more sense to me.
Thanks, Doug. Pat Allen.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to, in terms of school capacity issues, just make a couple of quick comments. The school board hasn't talked about this issue since the last time it came up at all, and so I don't want to make any news or anything like that, but just remind people kind of where we were when this issue did come up. I think it was 3 years ago. And the idea was that we wanted to make sure that we weren't in a position where we needed to go back to district patrons for any kind of an expansion bond of the new high school for 10 years. We're now 4 years out from the last bond ask that we made, and you know, the timelines that are being talked about here, I suspect would not have the same kind of reaction that they had for us the last time. But that said, the mayor's point and others that have made the same point about, you know, the mix of development for any taxing district, development that generates revenue without the same demand for services, whether it's you know, cops or firefighters or library services or school services, helps balance out the community's finances, and the school district is every bit in the same kind of a position as the rest of the community from that standpoint.
Thanks, Pat. Other comments? We haven't talked about it yet, but the Sherwood North ask, we'll hear about that, but it will be interesting because of the major amendment process in the history of Metro. And granted, I am not always right, but it's my understanding. Sound like Tim correcting coming there. Metro has never done a big exception. I'm drawing the blank of the name of the expansion, but what you can do every year, a major amendment for anything other than parks and schools and other government facilities. I've never heard them doing it for jobs, be it industrial or commercial. So it'll be interesting if we are supportive of that North Sherwood major amendment, if it'll be successful or not. If it is, then if we are not ready to do a mid-cycle in 21, even if Metro changes the calendar, we could be ready for a major amendment ask in 22, maybe. Just thinking out loud. But I'm jumping ahead to the major amendment.
Thank you. Erica's doing a good job of trying to keep us on track. I just want to sort of wrap up that the Sherwood West relook portion. Thank you guys. We really wanted you to have just a quick overview snapshot of where we were and where we're going and just kind of the issues. I think the conversation was really helpful. And I'm sure we will talk again as it gets closer, but we just kind of wanted you to have that out there and just sort of tee up your thinking on that. So let's transition to Sherwood North, and I'm going to turn this over to Erica.
Sure, thanks, Julia. So a little bit about the Sherwood North concept plan. The Deacon development team approached the city about requesting a major UGB amendment to Metro for office and commercial lands a couple of months ago. As part of this amendment process, the team needs an approved concept plan for the area as part of Metro's process for planning for new urban areas. In the past, many of these concept plans have been led, by city staff as city projects, with the exception of the high school area, which was very small and very specific to the development of the new high school. The area that this development team is looking at into bringing into the UGB is the relatively small area that fronts both north and south of Highway 99, and you'll see a map and get the full picture here in just a couple minutes. But given that planning staff, we didn't really have the capacity to lead a concept planning effort at this moment in time. We have been reviewing information from the team and helping them with a public engagement strategy by putting this concept plan online and helping to gather public input. So tonight the team is here with the draft concept plan for you to review. They're seeking your support and also your input. And then they're going to share with you the proposed timeline of this process and when the plan is expected to be reviewed by council. So with that, I'm going to introduce Steve Faust from 3J Consulting. Steve, are you on the line?
I'm here, Erica. Thanks.
Oh.
Just a quick question before I start. Do we have a hard stop in a few minutes here? Or our presentation is pretty brief, but I want to be respectful of your time.
Nope, no hard stop. Just
okay. Okay. Well, thank you for giving us some time on your agenda this evening. Our team is here on behalf of Deacon Construction to present the Sherwood North concept plan. I know that several of you through talking to Pete Snook and Ryan Shera have heard a little bit about this project, and also Erica presented and Julia presented the plan, or introduced the plan to Planning Commission a few weeks ago. Is the PowerPoint up, Erica? I can't see it on my screen. Yeah?
That's weird. You can't see it?
Yeah, it looks like you stopped sharing it, Erica.
That is weird. Let me go back. Sorry.
No problem.
Can you see it now?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Can you please go to the next slide? So the concept plan area is located in the Sherwood North Urban Reserve area, which is one of, as you know, several urban reserves surrounding the city of Sherwood. Next slide. The Sherwood North Urban Reserve is comprised of 3 sub-areas, the west, middle, and south. The Sherwood North concept plan includes a portion of the middle sub-area. The 100-year floodplain forms the western, northern, and eastern boundaries of the concept plan area, and that outside of our area, in that floodplain is included the Tualatin River National Wildlife Refuge. Existing city limits are located to the south, along with a portion of the urban reserve owned by PGE containing power lines that connect to an adjacent substation. We've reached out to PGE at the request of city staff and county staff as well to gauge their interest in participating in this proposed urban growth boundary expansion. And at this time, they indicated that they are not interested in participating. The Sherwood North Concept Plan area encompasses about 39 acres of that middle sub area. And as Erica mentioned, is divided into by Highway 99 into a 12-acre western section and about a 27-acre eastern section. There are several professional office and retail uses south of the west section, and the Home Depot is just south of the east section and within city limits. The concept plan that we've prepared proposes an extension of commercial office land uses in the west section and general commercial land use on the east section. Our intent is to help meet commercial land deficits and to help diversify the city's tax base. And now Todd Chase from FCS Group is going to speak to those proposed uses and the potential benefits to the city of Sherwood. Todd?
Thank you. Can you hear me all? Good. Yes, a couple of key tasks for this major amendment would be to, one, show a regional need for this use, and then two, show that no other lands within the region can currently address that need. So a pretty tall order there. To put this in perspective, starting with the Urban Growth Report back in 2018, the most recent one, it assumes the region's going to add between 300,000 and 500,000 people over the next 20 years. And that equates to about 14 to 20 cities about the size of Sherwood. And as was mentioned earlier, we're not adding cities to the Tri-County region. And so it's going to be up to the existing cities to try to accommodate that market pressure through all this proactive planning. Last year, the region added about 20,000 people. So over 20 years, that would equate to about 388,000 people. So the Metro forecast for population, 300 to 500,000 people, is actually in the ballpark. And in the Urban Growth Report, they throw out wide ranges, like households, 125,000 to 200,000 households, jobs, 100,000 to 186,000 jobs, without really determining where those jobs are going to go. And so there are two key components to this plan. And if you want to, you could basically on the west side, where you have the larger 26 acre site, we need about 20 acres of net land area to build approximately 150,000 square feet to 165,000 square feet of commercial uses, which would be sub-regional and regional serving. Probably have 1 to 3 anchor tenants on that mix. And there really is a near-term demand for that, even though I've thrown out some long-term numbers. We've looked at market trade inflow, outflow currently, and there is a large retail outflow from Sherwood currently, over 100 million from the city. You go beyond the city to about 20 minute drive, and that jumps up to about 700 million. So there's a big existing retail outflow from this local area. And some of that includes people that live south of you in Newburgh and McMinnville. A lot of that demand is in general merchandise. So this commercial site could certainly meet a good chunk of that demand. On the west, the west side, you have the employment site, and that's about 12 acres gross, about 9 acres net. And there you could easily accommodate about 100,000 to 150,000 square feet of 2 to 4 level buildings. And a lot of that would be professional services, but also a mix of contractor goods and furnishings and retail showrooms and things of that sort to accommodate the significant growth that Metro is forecasting in just your primary area, with 5,500 households being added to Sherwood King City over the next 20 years. So a lot of demand coming from housing. That would likely drive some of the professional office demand longer term, given the COVID pandemic. So that's probably out there a little ways, 10 years probably. But the general commercial on the east side could probably happen within 5 years based on the market right now. So those are the big program assumptions. Nothing has been pinned down. So we just ran a couple of scenarios. And in the next slide, I can show you what those scenarios would basically result in. It would position the region for a moderate bounce back next year in economic recovery. And we're all hopeful that we'll start to get beyond the pandemic next year. And but if you talk to realtors, the markets are still pretty hot in terms of home sales. So we are growing faster than the nation on average in the Northwest. There is higher demand in suburban areas than in more dense urban areas as a result of the COVID pandemic. Retail sales in the suburban and rural locations are up 12% over last year, and according to national data by Bloomberg, while sales are down significantly in more dense urban locations. So we are seeing the suburban areas really become highly desirable now, more so than ever. The jobs housing balance under Metro's numbers would increase from about 0.65 jobs per household in Sherwood to about 0.77 by 2040. And this forecast or this program would certainly help accommodate that job growth with about 600 jobs on site here. It would certainly help meet your 20-year commercial land deficit in Sherwood, at least a small portion of it, but also, more importantly, the regional land deficit, which we looked at the Metro Urban Growth Report and concluded that under a number of scenarios based on their growth rates, there's as much as a 933-acre deficit of commercial land that cannot be provided inside existing urban growth boundaries. We landed on 317 acres of 20-year commercial land needs for the region and feel pretty comfortable with that number. The benefits locally would be, of course, new tax revenues. This property would generate over 100 million in assessed value, produce about 300,000 a year for the city general fund, city of Sherwood, that is, at build out. And that's both properties on both sides of the road. It's about an equal split between the east and west side. There would be state income taxes with all the jobs here. We're talking about, as I mentioned, about 650 direct jobs on site between the two sites, about 550 indirect jobs providing business-to-business services for a total of 1,200 jobs. Average wage rates would range from about 50,000 per commercial job to 77,000 for an employee for a office type job. So 2 people working in a commercial venue would, 2 people in a household could make 100,000. So we have the state's minimum wage rate rising to $14.75 by year 2023. So that bodes well for those retail workers to be able to afford a house that's priced between $350,000 and $400,000 potentially. So those jobs become good jobs, plus about 575 near-term construction jobs in person years at about $61,000 per job. So big revenues there from the payroll point of view. Property taxes generate about $300,000 a year for the city. State income taxes about $4 million per year, and federal income taxes about $16 million per year, assuming these are all net new to the region. And Washington County would see about $3.5 million in one-time TDT revenues, and the city would receive about $3 million in SDC revenues from this development down the road. and annual utility revenues of about 130,000 per year for water, sewer, and storm and street lights at build out. So again, not small impacts, a sizable benefit from a fiscal point of view. There's also about $9 million in roadway investments that would be made concurrent with this proposal, and about 682,000 in off-site sewer, storm drainage, water, and other types of improvements off-site as well. So we have a funding plan that's going to be part of the concept plan that we're still working on, but the developer and the development impact fees would pick up probably the majority of those costs. And we think that there's a lot of fine tuning to be done here, but look forward to getting some city input and public input as we begin to move beyond the concept plan, hopefully into the master plan.
Thanks, Todd. Just one more slide. And we've been coordinating with not just Julia and Erica, but with ODOT, Washington County, adjacent property owners, and other service providers. We're going to continue to do that to refine this concept plan over the next few months. In working with Julia and Erica, we identified January 5th as a potential date for us to come back to you asking for your support. We hope to, as Julia mentioned earlier, the timeline for submitting an urban growth boundary major amendment application is February 1st to March 15th. We hope to submit our application on February 1st. And to the question of Metro's timeline, the initial timeline is roughly 120 days. So I think that would start, I'm not sure if that would start February 1st or March 15th, that 120 days. Here we have August 2021 listed. We also wanted to account for potential appeal period. And we looked at a recent application from the city of Lake Oswego, and the date on their ruling was August of 2020. So that's what we were looking at in terms of timeline. But by statute, it's roughly 120 days for Metro to make their decision. And with that, we'd love to answer any questions that you have. Oh, Julia, did you have something?
Oh, I was just going to highlight that I clearly misspoke when I said it was a couple months. So I appreciate you clarifying that.
Well, 120 days, that's a couple months.
But that was also talking about the mid-cycle residential ask versus the amendment application, unless the timelines are the same.
Oh.
I thought you were referring to my question from earlier, but maybe not. Yeah.
No, you're right. You're right. So I just want to, I guess, chime in. So what they're looking for is feedback on thoughts, ideas, any knee-jerk reactions. Erica's got a slide after this that talks, and maybe let's have Erica review quickly what would happen next. And then we can get questions or comments from council on the concept plan.
Right. So, Steve went over the proposed process, but let's just say if Metro approves this expansion, the properties then could be annexed and zoned, and then they would be incorporated into the city boundary. There could be possible refinements to the concept plan at this time. There could be, TSP amendments or other amendments, might be needed, map changes. But overall, we would expect that the zoning that's in the concept plan to remain the same. So the proposed process is the joint meeting tonight. They are going through a public engagement opportunity right now in the community, and I think Steve can probably touch on that. We have this going to council on January 5th to accept the concept plan that they are proposing. Then it would go to Metro in February, and then we're hoping for a decision date in August.
Kim has a question or comment.
Yeah, I was just wondering if this comes to council on January 5th, which is after the public involvement, are we going to get some sort of feedback from how that public involvement went and what the public felt of this project?
We would be more than happy to present the results of the public comments along with the draft or along with the concept plan when we come on January 5th. Yes.
Great, thank you.
And I feel, maybe it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyways, that obviously the decision is council's on whether or not you accept it or don't accept it, or accept it on January 5th or accept it on another date. So this is what is currently planned. If you get to January 5th and you have questions or concerns, you know, you obviously can ask for more information. But really what they're looking for is, yeah, what you're going to want. Obviously, you're saying you want to make sure that you get that feedback and that that's incorporated in, and I think that's really good feedback for them. So I just want to make sure that it goes, that it is said.
Thank you, Julia. Jean has a question or comment?
Just wondering if this is going straight to council, if there will be a planning commission hearing on the matter in December.
So right now there isn't a planning commission meeting scheduled in December to review the plan. Right now we just have it going to council for acceptance. We do know that in the future, if there's amendments that need to be made, the planning commission will see those at a later date and time.
But that's a good question, Jean. We did want to, that was something that Erica and I and frankly, the Deacon team have kind of, this is not a normal, not a process where, that is totally normal to us, that we're super familiar with. So it's certainly not required, and it's not a process that we have in our code. So it would be good to get feedback from council and the planning commission on that.
Thank you, Julia. Doug?
I was just curious about the nature of the community, the public involvement. Like, what does that look like?
Thanks for that question. Right now, we worked with Erica to put together a web page on the city's website where people can review the concept plan, and also posted on that page is an online comment form. We also, following this meeting, want to post this presentation and this meeting link to that site as well. And Erica can speak better to how the opportunity and the web page was distributed better than I can. So could you do that, Erica?
Yeah, thank you. So we pushed out the web page, the project page, in different ways. We posted it to Facebook, Nextdoor. We also posted it to Twitter, and we made it a news flash alert on the city's website as well.
Renee, question or comment?
Yeah, so excuse the naivety here. How does this part of the conversation then address the conversation we had prior to this with Sherwood West? Are we considering doing two asks? Are these two separate asks, two separate situations? I guess I need closure.
Yeah, and it is complicated. So that is a very good question. They're kind of apples and oranges to a certain extent. Sherwood West, we could potentially do a major amendment ask after we've done the relook for Sherwood West, when we're into the time frame that Metro opens that. What we were talking about with Sherwood West primarily was a mid-cycle ask, as opposed to what we're talking about in this situation, which is the major amendment application. So they're different. With Sherwood West, you could potentially do both, but we would likely not be in a position, we won't be in a position to do a major amendment request for Sherwood West by February. because that's 3 months from now.
Okay. So did I guess I'll go back to the other part of that question then. Did we close that conversation about what we're going to do there, or are we going to have further conversation, or
I
wait?
We did not close it specifically. We started it. I guess it sounds like we need to have some additional conversation about it. It was really more just starting that conversation with Sherwood West.
Thank you, Julia.
Yeah.
Sean, question?
Yeah, I guess just a question for Julia, Erica, and the group. What is really your capacity right now, your work capacity for taking on projects of this size all together at the same time, or do you have any concerns with handling all this all at the same time?
So I'm not sure if you were talking about the planning capacity. Yeah, we basically told them that the staff is not in a position to take on the planning of this. We certainly, as we are with any sort of application, can support it, support it from a staff standpoint. And that's one of the reasons why the developer has, hired their team and is really doing the lifting. So while there is certainly some staff involvement, the heavy lifting is from the developer and their team. Is that, you're talking about Sherwood North?
Well, it is Sherwood North and Sherwood West at the same time. If there was the potential to have both of them be part of a Metro ask, which we haven't certainly ascertained that to be the case, but if that were the case, would the city not be involved in writing both of the letters or working with Metro on that? Or
well, we will be minimally involved in the Sherwood North ask. I mean, certainly we'll support going through council and write a letter if necessary, but we won't be doing the staff report and the analysis and doing all the findings or anything like that. That's going to be the consultant. If we did a Sherwood West ask, yes, we would be very involved, and it would definitely be time intensive, as we are also doing the Sherwood West relook. That said, we will do whatever council directs us to do.
So short answer is you're not terribly concerned, should the case be that both of these move forward, that a ball wouldn't get dropped somewhere. It would be, I'm putting words into your mouth here, I guess, but
I'm not terribly concerned.
Okay.
It would definitely not, more work is more work, but we would make it happen.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for the question.
Thanks, Sean. So was I right or wrong? Has Metro done a major amendment for private development?
My understanding is that you are correct, that they have not done a major amendment for, and frankly, I don't think there's been a ton of requests, but yeah, primarily the major amendment has been for schools, is my understanding.
Yeah, I was trying to think of an actual ask for a private development versus a government type stuff, and I'm not sure if there has been one either. So, okay.
If I may add to, as we looked at the 20-acre sites around the region that Metro has in the urban growth boundary in their buildable land inventory, we basically found none that are developable within the next 5 to 10 years or privately owned.
And I suspect, given that the Metro region is running out of land, we'll see more requests like this. But in the past, I think we had higher inventories. That's probably why we didn't see as many requests going to Metro. It'd be interesting to find out if they've ever turned one down, and if we can learn from that.
I was part of me was happy to see interest in these edge pieces, just because when we were doing the big tri-county Metro land analysis of preserves and reserves and all that stuff, there was zero interest of doing anything in these areas, and I said, well, what about all these little areas up on the north side? And we got some attention, so as opportunities. So Sean, did you have a follow-up? Your hand is just up still. Great.
Sorry
Jean?
about that.
All right.
So a couple of comments. One is regarding this public involvement in the outreach. I know we have been struggling to get people engaged now that we don't have meetings in person. I also don't see that this information was pushed out either through like the boards and commission announcements or other public outreach. I also, we get the City of Sherwood Planning Department updates where they send out emails. I don't see that noticed on there. And I think there's other opportunities if they want to do public involvement to send out to some of our mailing lists. If we're not going to have a planning commission meeting to take some of the input to filter through and hear what's being said, then what about having the developer accept comments online, even if it's I don't know if they can link through to the website, but I don't know what I haven't seen it because I haven't seen a link. I haven't been given an opportunity to look at it if there's a place for a citizen to provide input, either free form or through a survey, either through the City of Sherwood website. So.
And those are great, Gene. Those are great points. And I apologize. Did you, Erica or Julia, is there not a planning commission meeting in December?
We have one.
Sorry, I was on mute. We do. We have one scheduled on December 8th.
So this could be presented, could be on the agenda as an opportunity for the public to give comment when they see it on the agenda, see the a packet of whatever, and then you can also get comments from commissioners who have a little more time to chew on it. Why not?
Thank you for that feedback. That's
yes.
A great suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mayor. I was concerned that we would be skipping planning commission in a planning process. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Kim, question or comment?
I actually wanted to follow up with Pat Allen's comment. Is he still on?
He dropped off. He sent me a text.
Okay. Well, I will follow up with him directly then. Thanks.
Okay. Other questions or comments? This is the last item and bit to discuss in this work session I'm aware of. Any last things for the good of the order before we adjourn the work session?
Thank you guys for sticking with us.
I would like to thank staff for all the hard work they put into this, the entire team that's worked on the comprehensive planning up to this point. Really appreciate it, and good presentation tonight.
Yeah, just this is Pete Snook, and I want to say I sat in the background because you guys were doing a great job of. But I wanted to come in at the last second here and just say I appreciate the effort that's going into this on all sides, and especially Julie and her team, because it is true that these things we just expect them to make it happen. And, this is a good city to work with. I can tell you that from experience.
We like to hear that.
We're proud of all of our folks, our volunteers and our staff, and in these crazy days, it just even harder. So with that, thank you all. We are adjourned. We are going to start our city council meeting roughly 32 minutes late. So we're going to take a 4-minute break, 5-minute break before we start the second.